Aloha! It's Professor Jay, and today I'm going to show you how to read a status sheet. What is a status sheet? It's a one-stop shop that allows you to find out everything that's happened to a bill. It also gives you some tips on figuring out who is opposing it, where it's going next. First, I'll show you how to find a status sheet. Then I'll show you how to interpret it. Finding the status sheet is easy with the legislature's new website. You take a look at the first box in the upper left-hand corner that says Bill Status / Measure Status. The reason it includes Measure Status is because the legislature also takes a look at things called concurrent resolutions and resolutions, and those are the other measures referred to here. But for our purposes, we're just going to take a look at bills because bills have the force and effect of law, and resolutions don't. So we would put a bill number in here, let's say this one, and click Go, and that would take us to the status sheet. So let me walk you through this because this is a dynamic information-packed page, but you kind of have to know how to read it. The first thing you're going to see on the top is the bill number, and then if it currently has any drafts, you're going to see an SD1 for any Senate drafts and HD1 for any House drafts. In this case, there have actually been two House drafts, so it's SB1, it's SB8, Senate Draft 1, House Draft 2. The link here, this PDF link, will take us to a copy of the bill if that's what you wanted to see, just to make sure you're talking about the same bill. The next thing it gives you is the measure title, what this bill is all about. Then it gives you the report title and description, which are two informal parts of the bill that don't show up in the final version, but that help people like you who are tracking what's happening in the bill during the session. The report title gives you a short description of what it's about, and the description itself gives you a few sentences about what the bill does. The next space is for a companion bill. Sometimes identical bills are introduced in both the House and the Senate. This most commonly happens when you're getting package bills introduced. People like the governor are not allowed to introduce bills directly because the governor is part of the executive department. However, the governor always has some bills that he or she wants to introduce, so the governor asks the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate as a courtesy to introduce all of his or her bills. This cluster of bills is called a package. Actually, quite a number of people have package bills in the legislature. This would include the prosecutors and the counties. So if there's a bill that is a direct identical version of this bill, it would be listed as a companion bill. If it's part of a package, it would be listed on this next line. And we can see there's no companion bill, there's no package. It's important to know if there is a companion bill because sometimes you'll find out from the status sheet that the bill you're looking at has died. It failed to move out of committee on a timely basis. However, the same language may very well be alive in the companion version. So being able to spot a companion bill and then of course going to its status sheet will give you more complete information. Okay, the next link you'll see down here is for current referral. Notice the word current. This depends on where the bill is in the process. As you know, Senate bills start out in the Senate. When the bill is still with the Senate, the current referrals will be the two Senate committees. In this case, they are not EDN and FINE, which stands for the House Education and House Finance. The original referrals, as you can see by looking at the status sheet, were EDU, which is Senate Education, and WAM, which stands for Ways and Means, which is the Senate's version of the Finance Committee. So when the bill is current, that will tell you, this would have read EDU/WAM, but now that it's in the House, because it has passed out of the Senate, as you can tell because there is a House draft number up there, the current referrals are for the House committees. Why does this change over time? It changes because the people who built the website are assuming that if you're coming to this status, you may want to affect the bill, to support it or oppose it. So you're interested in what the current referrals are, not the past ones. Okay, Let's go on to the next one. You'll see a number of names, some of which are all in caps and one of which is in upper and lower case. Anytime a bill is introduced, it has to be signed as a primary introducer by at least one representative or one senator. However, a bunch of representatives or senators may think the same bill is a great idea and will want to sign on as a primary sponsor. This means if the bill passes, they get to go back to their constituents and say, I was a primary sponsor of this very important act. Their names are all in capital letters. Sometimes people just want to show support, but they don't want to be known as a primary supporter. That's when their name is like that would be Senator Ryan's name at the end, which starts with a capital R but then goes into lowercase. That indicates a secondary introducer. Okay, now let's go a little further down, still in the same left-hand column to the status sheet. We'll take a look at what you can get in the right-hand column after we're done here. This may look, and I'll give you a little glimpse of what it looks like further down, a little confusing, but if you break down what you're seeing, it actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's just bring this up to here. The columns list the date. The next column will either have an S if it's an action that happened in the Senate, or an H if it happened in the House. And then in the next column, it will tell you what happened. So let's go through the status sheet one line at a time, and combined with what you already know about the legislative process, you'll find that it's actually easy to follow. The first thing that happens is that a bill is introduced. Here it was introduced on January 19th. It automatically passed first reading. As you know, nothing happens in first reading. Its only purpose is to give control of the bill to either the President of the Senate or the Speaker of the House so that they can give a referral. And you can see on the next day, this was referred to EDU and WHAM, Senate Education and Ways and Means. Apparently this was a very popular bill because the same day the Education Committee scheduled a public hearing, 4 days later. 4 days later, you'll see the report on what happened at the meeting. It says the committee recommended that the measure be passed with amendments, and then it gives you the votes. Looks like everybody voted in favor of it. Nobody voted with reservations, nobody voted no, and no one was excused. 2 days later, it says that it was reported from EDU with Standing Committee Report 1 with recommendation of passage on second reading as amended and referred to Ways and Means. Now, the reason there's a separate date for what the committee did on the 24th and when the report came out 2 days later is because a standing committee report needed to be written. Anytime a bill passes out of committee, whether or not it's amended, it needs a standing committee report which tells the reader what happened to the bill. It looks as though it took 2 days for this report to be drafted, along with the amendments, and so the report was then issued. Its number is Standing Committee Report 1. And it was referred to WHAM. But before it goes to WHAM, it has to go back for a second reading. So you can see that even before it got its second reading, this is a little unusual. On the 25th, WHAM scheduled a hearing for it. And on the 26th, the Standing Committee report, was adopted, and the bill passed second reading, as amended, in front of the whole chamber. The next thing you see on the 28th is the results of the WHAM hearing. WHAM recommended that it be passed, but this time unamended. And then, of course, it lists who voted aye. Then, on the same day, the committee report was prepared, reported from WHAM, and it was recommended that the bill be passed on third reading. There was 1 day notice, which is required before you can have a third reading, and then on the 31st of January, the bill passed third reading with 25 ayes. Now, this is unusual. The speed of this is unusual. This was a bill that the legislature really wanted to pass. But these steps in the same order you would find with any bill that gets this far. So let's take a look and see what happened after it passed third reading. You notice that in the column on 131, the S's turn to H's, and it says received from the Senate, Senate Communication number 5. Now the control of the bill has been transferred over to the House, and you will see very close relationship to what you've seen before. On the 1st of February, it passed first reading in the House, and on the same day it was referred to the EDN and Finance Committees we talked about above. I'm just going to scroll down so we can see a little bit more. Now we're in the House. So it was scheduled to be heard by EDN on Monday, 2/7, and then on the 4th, it looked as though it rescheduled the bill to be heard on the 9th. And then on the 4th, it says it was deleted from the meeting, and on the 7th, it said it was deferred, and then on the 9th, you'll see what happened in the EDN meeting. It recommended that it be passed with amendments. Then you can see that the committee report was reported 2 days later on the 11th, and then it passed second reading on the same day, February 11th. Then it was scheduled to be heard by Finance on Valentine's Day, and the scheduled hearing was the 16th of February, and the Committee on Finance recommended the measure be passed with amendments. The committee report came out a day later on the 17th, and then it passed third readings on the 22nd of February. Notice that on the 23rd, the letter changes back to S, and it says received from House Communication number 11. The reason it had to go back to the Senate is because the House changed it at least twice, once in the House Draft 1 and once in the House Draft 2. The Senate gets to have final say over whether it's okay with these amendments. In this case, what did the Senate do? They agreed with the House amendments and they placed it on the calendar for the final reading in the Senate, because the Senate needs a whole final reading. What's much more common would be for the Senate to disagree to the amendments and then to go to conference, and if so, that would be listed on the status sheet. But that didn't happen here. So it said that the Senate agrees with the House amendments, but that's not the same thing as a reading. It basically means the Senate is going to go along with the amendments, but it is not the final vote. The final vote was going to happen on March 3rd, and you can see on March 3rd it passed final reading with 23 people voting aye, nobody voting no, and 2 senators excused. It then says it was enrolled to the governor, and that just means it was presented to the governor. And then on the 16th, the governor signed it, and it became law. It became Act 5 of the 2011 legislative session. Okay, I think this is a pretty clear walkthrough, and I think you could walk through a status sheet on your own. But let me show you what else is on top of the status sheet. If you want to know exactly what these changes were, you could take a look at the bill and compare it word for word on the amended version. For instance, you could look at the original bill here. You can see it says Senate Bill 8. And then you could look at the bill here. You can see that it says SD1, HD1, and you could do a word-for-word comparison. But that's often tedious, and sometimes you could see the change in the language, but you don't know what it means. For that, we turn to the committee reports, and what's really nice is that they're all listed up here. If you click on these links, as I've been doing, you'll go to the HTML version. If you click on the PDF icon, you'll go to the slightly nicer to read PDF version. And this is what a committee report looks like. There's a standing committee report number, the date, the version. This was on the House Draft 1. You can see that it's addressed to Calvin Say, the Speaker of the House. This is the Education Committee, and it reports what happened. Here's the purpose of the bill. It says who testified, and then I'm going to scroll down again. It shows you what the changes were. It says your committee has amended this bill by reducing the number of voting members from 11 to 9, and it tells you in which way they did this change. It also changed information relating to the public high school member, requirements for the governor to select, etc. You can see that this nicely delineated list of what happened in the committee report is going to be much easier for you to figure out than if you had had to look at the whole bill itself and done a line-by-line comparison. So the legislature makes it very easy for you to find out not only what the bill said, but the report that analyzes what the changes were. Now, right below that, you see a link to all the testimony that was submitted. You remember that the first committee was the Senate Education Committee. If you want to see that testimony, you'd click on this link here. The one that says late is testimony that came in past the 24-hour in advance deadline. So let's take a look and see what this looks like. Here's the education original one. And you'll see up here that there's 43 pages of testimony. And sometimes the testimony is nicely typed on letterhead. Here's OHA's, Campaign Spending Commission. And sometimes you get people who just send in emails. They're just saying, I oppose this, and not making any specific comments. This person just wanted his voice to be heard. So that's how you read a status sheet. As I said, I think it's pretty explanatory once somebody walks you through it, and I hope you have fun exploring what happened to bills that are of interest to you.